clothesline sunlight that killed bacteria, cast iron skillets that added iron to every meal, bone broth simmered until the minerals left the marrow. Your grandmother practiced kitchen science decades before research caught up. Most of those women are gone now. Here are 30 banned 1950s housewife habits scientists now say were genius. Before the dryer became the default in every American laundry room, clotheslines stretched across nearly every backyard in the country. And the science behind them was better than anyone realized. Ultraviolet light from direct sunlight acts as a natural disinfectant, killing bacteria on fabric the same way UV lamps work in clinical settings. Your grandmother knew whites went in the sun and colors went in the shade, and she never read a study to figure that out. She could tell you exactly how to fold a bedsheet over the line so it dried without creasing. 1/3 draped over, hem to hem, wrong side out. Homeowners associations started banning clotheslines in the 1970s, calling them eyesores, and by the 1990s, most suburban yards had none at all. The fresh smell of sun-dried cotton came from a photochemical reaction between UV rays and wet fabric, something no dryer sheet has ever replicated. She hung laundry in the morning and brought it in by afternoon, and nobody thought to call it self-care. Nobody needed to. Every kitchen worth remembering had a cast iron skillet so heavy you needed both hands to lift it, and the woman who owned it treated it like an heirloom, because it was. A 1991 study in the Journal of Food Science confirmed what those cooks already suspected. Food prepared in cast iron absorbed measurable amounts of dietary iron, with acidic dishes like applesauce gaining up to 7 milligrams per serving and spaghetti sauce picking up 3 to 5. The seasoning on that skillet, layers of polymerized fat built up over years of daily use, created a natural nonstick surface without a single synthetic chemical. She never washed it with soap. She wiped it clean, rubbed it with a thin coat of lard, and set it back on the stove still warm. Your grandmother did not need a global health recommendation. She needed cornbread for supper and a skillet her mother gave her, and that was enough. She never called it bone broth. She called it stock, or soup base, or just the pot on the back burner. Chicken carcasses, beef knuckles, vegetable trimmings that would have gone to waste. All of it went into a heavy pot with cold water and a splash of vinegar, then simmered for the better part of a day. The vinegar was the secret. It pulled calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus out of the bones and into the liquid, and she learned that trick from her own mother without ever knowing the chemistry behind it. Modern nutritional research confirms that roughly 70% of the immune system is housed in the gut, and collagen-rich broth supports the intestinal lining that keeps it working. What sells for $9 a carton at the health food store cost her nothing, just time, scraps, and patience. The kitchen smelled like warmth itself when that pot was going. Today, you can buy bone broth powder in a pouch. It is not the same thing. The chemical industry spent decades convincing American housewives they needed a different product for every surface in the house. One for glass, one for tile, one for porcelain, one for wood. Your grandmother needed two. White vinegar, naturally antibacterial and able to cut through grease on contact, and baking soda, a mild abrasive that lifts stains without scratching. When combined, the two produce a carbon dioxide reaction that loosens grime from grout, drains, and oven interiors without releasing a single airborne toxin. She kept a spray bottle of diluted vinegar under the sink and a box of Arm & Hammer beside it. And between the two, she cleaned everything from kitchen counters to bathroom tile. Modern toxicology studies have linked regular use of commercial spray cleaners to a 20% increase in respiratory problems. She paid pennies for what worked. The rest of us paid dollars for what smelled like a chemical plant. If the vinegar cleaned the surfaces, the morning air cleaned the rooms themselves, and that habit started before the sun was fully up. The very first thing she did after making coffee was walk through the house and crack every window, even in January if the cold was bearable. She called it airing out. The Environmental Protection Agency would later determine that indoor air carries 2 to 5 times more pollutants than outdoor air, trapped by insulation, synthetic carpets, and cleaning product residue. Cross-ventilation, windows open on opposite sides to create a draft, flushes those contaminants in minutes. She did not know the word off-gassing. She just knew a closed-up house smelled stale, and stale meant something was wrong. 15 minutes of open windows on a cool morning did what no air purifier can fully replicate. Most families in the 1950s owned one car, and it went to work with the husband every morning. So she walked. To the butcher, the baker, the five and dime, the post office, sometimes 2 or 3 stops before lunch, sometimes with a child on each hip and a cloth bag over her shoulder. A 1955 household guide estimated the average American housewife took 15,000 steps a day just keeping house, which works out to roughly 5.5 miles. Cardiologists now agree that consistent, low-intensity daily movement does more for long-term heart health than sporadic high-intensity workouts. She did not own a pedometer or a fitness tracker. She just had errands to run and no other way to run them. The walk home from the market was the only quiet she got some days, 10 minutes with no one pulling at her sleeve. She never called it exercise, she just called it Tuesday. In the 1950s, the average housewife spent 2 to 3 hours a day preparing meals from raw ingredients, peeling, chopping, simmering, baking. And every bit of it was dismissed as drudgery the moment convenience food hit the shelves. Frozen dinners, boxed mixes, and canned soups promised liberation from the kitchen, and by the 1970s, most American families had traded homemade for heat and serve. Harvard researchers have since connected the rise of ultra-processed food to higher rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. She did not have a nutrition degree. She had a sharp knife, a cutting board, and the understanding that a roasted chicken, a pot of rice, and green beans from the garden made a complete meal without a single ingredient she could not pronounce. The food industry sold speed as freedom, and it cost us our health. She was not trapped in that kitchen. She was feeding people real food. Pull a dinner plate out of your cabinet right now and measure it. Chances are it runs 11 or 12 inches across. In the 1950s, the standard dinner plate measured 9 inches, and nobody left the table hungry. Researchers at Cornell University's Food and Brand Lab confirmed that plate size directly influences how much a person serves and eats, with larger plates leading to 20 to 30% more consumption without any increase in satisfaction. She did not read that study. She used the dishes she had, served a reasonable portion, and put the rest away. Dessert was fruit after most meals, with cake or pie reserved for Sundays and holidays, not because she was restricting anything, but because sugar cost money and nobody expected sweets on a Wednesday. The smaller plate, the regular meal times, the understanding that snacking between meals was poor manners, the whole family practiced portion control without using the phrase. Monday was wash day, Tuesday was ironing, Wednesday was mending, Thursday was baking, Friday was shopping, Saturday was heavy cleaning, Sunday was rest. She kept this rotation not because a book told her to, though plenty of books did, but because the sheer volume of domestic work demanded a system, and systems require rhythm. Behavioral psychologists now understand that routine reduces decision fatigue and lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that wears the body down over time. Every 1950s homemaking guide insisted a schedule was the backbone of a well-run household, and modern cognitive science agrees. When the brain does not have to decide what comes next, it conserves energy for the tasks that matter. She woke at the same hour, cleaned in the same order, cooked at the same time, and went to bed knowing exactly what tomorrow held. From the outside, it looked rigid. From the inside, it was the closest thing to freedom she had. The kitchen garden was not a hobby. It was a line item in the household budget that happened to grow in the dirt. Tomatoes along the back fence, herbs by the kitchen door, squash spreading wherever it pleased, and a compost pile in the corner that turned coffee grounds, eggshells, and potato peels back into soil. Researchers at the University of Bristol discovered that Mycobacterium vaccae, a bacterium naturally found in garden soil, triggers serotonin production and reduces anxiety, which means digging in the dirt was doing more for her mental health than she knew. Victory gardens from the war years had taught a generation how to grow food, and many kept their plots going well into the 1960s. Neighbors traded surplus over the fence, zucchini for tomatoes, basil for green onions, and the whole block ate better for it. Nobody called it farm to table. They just called it the garden. The garden fed the table, but nothing left that table wasted, especially not the fat. Every roast, every pan of bacon, every fried chicken produced drippings, and she poured every drop through a fine mesh strainer into a tin can kept beside the stove. Rendered beef tallow and pork lard were the primary cooking fats in American kitchens until the 1960s, when the vegetable oil industry launched a campaign to replace them with corn, soybean, and canola oils. Modern lipid science has shown that saturated animal fats are far more heat-stable than polyunsaturated seed oils, which oxidize at high temperatures and produce harmful compounds. She fried eggs and saved drippings not because she was reckless. She was precise with her resources. A single tablespoon of rendered fat could season a pan of cornbread, start a roux for gravy, or sauté a mess of greens. During the war, the government collected household fat for munitions. 1 pound contained enough glycerin for several artillery shells. She saved it because wasting anything felt wrong. Long before the word probiotic appeared on a yogurt label, she was packing cucumbers into mason jars with salt brine and dill, setting crocks of sauerkraut in the cellar, and putting up green tomato relish every September. Lacto-fermentation, preserving vegetables in salt water until beneficial bacteria convert their natural sugars into lactic acid, does something no canning or freezing method can match. It creates live cultures that support gut health. The difference between a true fermented pickle and a vinegar-pickled one is the difference between medicine and imitation. She knew that by taste alone, the real ones had a tang that bit the back of your tongue, and the jars sometimes hissed when you cracked the seal because the bacteria were still alive. Today, the probiotic supplement industry generates billions selling capsules that deliver a fraction of what 1 jar of her sauerkraut provided for free. The crocks are mostly gone now. The cultures she kept alive for decades, passing brine from one batch to the next, went quiet when she did. She kept a darning egg in the sewing basket, a smooth wooden tool shaped like a mushroom that she slipped inside a worn sock to stretch the fabric taut before weaving new thread across the hole. Every button that popped off a shirt went into the button box. Every hem that dropped got stitched back up the same evening. Frayed collars were unpicked, turned inside out, and sewn back on. The global fashion industry now produces an estimated 92 million tons of textile waste every year, and the slow fashion movement that emerged in response is essentially asking people to do what she did without thinking. Repair instead of replace, care for what you own, and stop treating clothing as disposable. Schools in the 1940s and 50s taught girls darning, hemming, and basic garment repair as part of the standard home economics curriculum. Those classes disappeared by the 1980s. The darning egg disappeared with them. Lemon halves dipped in salt for scrubbing copper. Soap flakes dissolved in warm water for mopping floors. Borax sprinkled in the toilet bowl and left overnight. She had a recipe for every surface in the house, and not a single one required a trip to the cleaning aisle. The ingredients came from the pantry, cost almost nothing, and left no chemical residue on the countertops where she kneaded bread the next morning. A 2019 study published in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine found that women who used commercial spray cleaners regularly experienced lung function decline equivalent to smoking 20 cigarettes a day over the same period. She cleaned with lemon juice because it cut grease and smelled good. She used borax because her mother used borax. The reason it worked was chemistry. The reason she trusted it was memory. If the morning was labor and the kitchen was chemistry, the afternoon held a secret the modern world has almost entirely lost. She stopped. Every homemaking guide from the 1940s through the 1950s recommended that a woman rest for 10 to 15 minutes in the afternoon, preferably in a dark room with her feet elevated. Some guides specifically mentioned soaking cotton pads in witch hazel and placing them over the eyes. NASA researchers would later find that a nap of just 26 minutes improved pilot alertness by 54% and performance by 34%. She did not nap because she was lazy. She napped because she had been on her feet since 6 in the morning and dinner still needed cooking, Kids still needed bathing, and the evening still required her full attention. That small pause in the afternoon was not indulgence. It was engineering. The sound of the iron hissing across a damp pillowcase. That was Tuesday afternoon, or maybe Wednesday, depending on the week. She ironed everything: sheets, pillowcases, handkerchiefs, her husband's work shirts, the children's Sunday clothes. Most people today consider ironing bed linens absurd, a vanity from a slower time. But a hot iron pressed across fabric at temperatures above 130 degrees Fahrenheit kills dust mites on contact, the same microscopic creatures responsible for triggering allergies and aggravating asthma in millions of households. Dermatologists now recommend ironing pillowcases for patients with acne-prone or sensitive skin because the heat eliminates bacteria that accumulate in the weave between washes. She did not know about dust mites. She knew wrinkled sheets felt wrong, and she knew crisp cotton against your face at night meant someone in the house still cared about the small things. When she stopped ironing, it meant her hands could not hold the iron anymore. Wednesday was pork chops, Thursday was spaghetti, Friday was fish. The menu repeated every 7 days with minor variations, and nobody complained because everybody knew what was coming, and what was coming was always good. Good Housekeeping and Ladies' Home Journal published weekly dinner menus in nearly every issue throughout the 1950s, and most households followed some version of the pattern. Behavioral economists now have a name for the exhaustion that comes from making too many small choices in a single day. Decision fatigue, and meal planning eliminates one of the most persistent sources. She bought groceries once a week because she already knew what she was cooking. She wasted almost nothing because every ingredient had a destination. The rotation was not boring. It was efficient, and it meant she could shop the sales, prep in advance, and never stand in front of an open refrigerator at 5 o'clock wondering what to make. If you ever watched your grandmother drop a kitchen rag into a pot of boiling water on the stove and thought she had lost her mind, she had not. She was sterilizing it. Microbiologists at the University of Mauritius found that kitchen sponges and dishcloths harbor up to 54 billion bacteria per cubic centimeter, making them dirtier than the average toilet seat. The standard advice today is to replace your sponge every week or two. She never replaced hers. She boiled them. A rolling boil for 10 minutes killed everything: E. coli, salmonella, staphylococcus, and the cloth came out white again, wrung dry, and hung on the line to finish in the sun. She had a different rag for dishes, a different one for counters, and a different one for the floor, and if you mixed them up, she would know. She always knew. The screen door slammed behind them at 8 in the morning, and they did not come back until they heard her voice calling from the porch at supper time. No schedule, no supervision, no structured activities, just a pack of neighborhood kids with bicycles, creek beds, and the understanding that you came home when the streetlights came on. Pediatric researchers have since connected outdoor free play to stronger immune systems, better eyesight. Children who spend more time outdoors have significantly lower rates of myopia, and improved executive function, the part of the brain that governs impulse control and problem solving. She did not send them outside because she did not care. She sent them outside because fresh air, skinned knees, and figuring things out without an adult hovering over every decision was how kids learn to be people. Nobody filed a report. Nobody called it neglect. The neighborhood raised them together. Those kids came running when they smelled it. Bread baking is the one scent no child has ever ignored. She baked at least once a week, sometimes twice, and the process started the night before with a sponge. Flour, water, and yeast left to ferment on the counter until morning. That slow overnight fermentation is the same principle behind sourdough, and food scientists now confirm it reduces phytic acid in flour by more than 50%, which unlocks minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium that fast-rise commercial bread locks away. The glycemic index drops too. Slow fermented bread releases sugar into the bloodstream gradually instead of spiking it the way a store-bought loaf does. She punched the dough down with her fist, shaped it with her palms, and set it to rise again in a greased pan near the warm stove. Nobody makes it like that anymore. Not because the recipe is lost, because the patience is. She stood at the sink twice a day, sometimes 3 times, hands in water so hot she kept a second basin of cool water beside it to dip her fingers when the heat became too much. Washing dishes by hand was one of the first chores to disappear when the automatic dishwasher became affordable in the 1960s, and good riddance, most people said. But a Swedish study published in the journal Pediatrics found that children raised in households where dishes were washed by hand had significantly lower rates of eczema, asthma, and seasonal allergies compared to those in homes with dishwashers. The researchers attributed it to the hygiene hypothesis. Early exposure to a wider range of microbes trains the immune system to distinguish between genuine threats and harmless substances. She washed in a specific order every single time. Glassware first, then silverware, then plates, then pots, cleanest to dirtiest, so the water stayed usable as long as possible. Nothing wasted, not even the dishwater. She put on a dress, stockings, and shoes before she made breakfast, even if she had nowhere to go and no one was coming over. Every homemaking manual from the era insisted on it, and most women complied not because a book demanded it, but because the act of getting dressed changed how the day felt. Researchers at Northwestern University coined the term enclothed cognition in a 2012 study that demonstrated clothing directly affects cognitive performance and self-perception. Participants who wore a lab coat performed measurably better on attention tasks than those who did not. She did not need a study. She needed to feel like a person and not a machine. And putting on lipstick and a clean dress at 7 in the morning was how she drew the line between herself and the house that never stopped needing her. The guides even specified shoes, not slippers, because slippers told your brain to rest, and there was no rest until evening. Twice a year, once when the cold broke and once before it returned, she pulled every piece of furniture away from the walls, took down every curtain, beat every rug over the clothesline, washed every window inside and out, and scrubbed the floors on her hands and knees until the wood showed its grain again. Spring cleaning was not decorative, it was structural. Researchers at George Washington University analyzed household dust samples and found over 45 toxic chemicals embedded in ordinary home dust, including flame retardants, phthalates, and endocrine disruptors that accumulate in carpets, upholstery, and corners where nobody thinks to look. A deep seasonal overhaul physically removes what daily maintenance misses. She did not know the word phthalate. She knew a house that sat through winter without a proper scrubbing felt heavy, and when it was clean, you could breathe again. The jar sat next to the stove in every kitchen that mattered. A mason jar or an old coffee tin with a lid, half full of off-white rendered fat that smelled faintly of smoke and salt. Bacon grease. She used it to fry eggs in the morning, to season cast iron, to start a pot of beans, to make the cornbread that held the whole meal together. The medical establishment spent 40 years telling Americans that animal fat was poison and vegetable oil was salvation. But the science has shifted. Bacon grease contains roughly 45% monounsaturated fat, the same type found in olive oil, and is far more heat-stable than polyunsaturated seed oils that oxidize and break down at frying temperatures. She never threw it away. She strained it through cheesecloth while it was still warm, sealed it, and reached for it every single day. If you asked her why, she would have looked at you like you were wasting her time. Why would anyone throw away something that made everything taste better? The kitchen fed the body, but the voice fed everything else. And the last sound many of those little ones heard before sleep was a story read aloud from a book held open on her lap. She read to them every night, not because a pediatrician told her to, not because a parenting blog recommended it, but because her mother had read to her and her mother before that. The American Academy of Pediatrics now estimates that being read to in childhood builds more than 1 million neural connections in the developing brain, strengthening vocabulary, comprehension, and the capacity for empathy in ways no screen has ever matched. She sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp turned low and read until the breathing changed, until the child was gone and the story was talking to an empty room. Those books are still on shelves in houses where nobody reads them anymore. The pages smell like her hands. The table was set before anyone sat down. Plates, napkins, glasses of water or milk, serving dishes in the center. Never eaten standing over the stove, never eaten in front of the television, never eaten alone in a bedroom with a phone. Dinner happened at the same time every night, and everybody showed up. Researchers at Columbia University's National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse tracked family meal frequency for more than 2 decades and found that teenagers who ate dinner with their families 5 or more times per week were significantly less likely to use drugs, drink alcohol, or struggle academically. She set that table because she believed a family that ate together held together, and 20 years of longitudinal research proved her right. The conversations were not always easy. Sometimes they were arguments. Sometimes they were silence after a hard day. But the chairs were full, and the food was warm, and for 30 minutes the world outside the kitchen stopped. Not everything belonged in the refrigerator, and she knew exactly what went where. Tomatoes on the windowsill, never in the crisper, because cold temperatures destroy the volatile compounds that give them flavor, something UC Davis post-harvest researchers confirmed decades later. Potatoes and onions in a cool, dark cabinet, separated because the gases one releases make the other sprout faster. Bread in a cloth-covered tin, never in plastic, because moisture trapped against the crust breeds mold. Her pantry was organized by season. Canned goods from summer on the back shelves, dried beans and rice within reach, flour and sugar in lidded tins to keep the weevils out. The modern refrigerator convinced us that cold is always better, and we lost the knowledge of which foods need air and which need nothing but a shelf. Her handwriting slanted slightly to the right, and the ink sometimes smudged where her left hand dragged across the page. She wrote thank you notes for every gift, every kindness, every dinner she attended. She wrote letters to her sisters on Sunday afternoons, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold beside her. Neuroscientists at Indiana University used fMRI scans to demonstrate that handwriting activates regions of the brain, particularly Broca's area, which governs language production, that typing does not engage at all. The physical act of forming letters by hand improves memory retention, deepens emotional processing, and strengthens the connection between thought and expression. She did not write for the cognitive benefits. She wrote because a letter meant someone was thinking of you, specifically you, long enough to sit down and say so. There are shoeboxes and closets all over this country full of her handwriting. Nobody writes back anymore. She kept a ledger in the kitchen drawer, a small ruled notebook where every penny that entered and every penny that left was recorded by hand. Groceries, utilities, the kids' shoes, the tithe envelope for Sunday. Some households use the envelope system, cash divided into labeled envelopes at the start of each week, and when an envelope was empty, the spending stopped. Behavioral finance researchers have found that people who track expenses by hand develop significantly greater spending awareness than those who rely on apps, because the physical act of writing a number forces the brain to process it differently than watching it scroll past on a screen. She balanced that ledger every Friday after the young ones were in bed, and she knew to the cent what was left. The discipline it taught vanished with the notebook. When the dishes were done and the kitchen was clean and the little ones were finally quiet, she went out to the porch. Not to do anything, just to sit. The neighbors were out too. Mrs. Henderson across the street, the Kowalski family 2 doors down, old Mr. Jeffries who waved but never came over. They talked about the garden, whose kid broke what window, and sometimes they said nothing at all and just watched the lightning bugs blink over the lawn. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, the longest-running study on human happiness, spanning more than 75 years, concluded that the strongest predictor of health and longevity is not wealth or career success. It is the quality of a person's close relationships. She sat on that porch because the people she loved were within earshot and the day was finally done. The porches are mostly gone now. So are the people who sat on them. When you hear the word Viking, what comes to your mind? Clad in armor and with helmets armed with horns? Fun fact, I just want to note that those helmets did not have horns. But what about the women that were left behind when they went out to raid and to plunder? It may not be what one would expect, but being a Viking housewife was not an easy job either. These were the women of Norse society who worked hard maintaining households and farms and keeping all the home fires burning while their menfolk went off in search of fame or fortune. Therefore, how did it feel to be a Viking housewife? Was it all baking bread and waiting for the long ship to come home? Far from it. So, let's get into the lives of these courageous ladies and check how they managed hearth and home and, in some cases, the sword. Airing out the house daily meant opening windows to let fresh air circulate through rooms that had accumulated the staleness of sleep, cooking, and habitation. Morning routines included raising sashes to invite breezes that flushed out odors long before air conditioning sealed homes into climate-controlled boxes. Even in winter, windows opened briefly to exchange stale air for fresh. Cross-ventilation from strategically opened windows moved air through entire homes, carrying away cooking smells and musty odors. Grandmothers believed fresh air was healthful, that sealed homes bred illness while ventilated ones promoted vigor. The practice also dried moisture that could encourage mold, refreshed fabrics absorbing household odors, and made returning home pleasant. Screens kept insects out while allowing breezes in. The daily airing ritual connected indoor life to outdoor rhythms, bringing nature's cleaning power into domestic spaces. Homes breathed along with their inhabitants, staying fresh through circulation. But of course, the women of ancient Egypt were not completely deprived of rights. They could own property and even initiate a divorce. Imagine that. You could run an estate and divorce your husband if he forgot your birthday often enough. Modern housewives would have said, that is a victory. In ancient Greece, the position of a housewife greatly depended on the social status of the woman who occupied the position. The female of the rich was confined in the gynaeceum, a section in the house for women. Their main functions were childbearing and rearing, overseeing servants, and spinning and weaving cloth. These women were so stuck at home that you would have thought they came up with the work-from-home policy centuries ago. On the other hand, poorer women did not have the privilege of withdrawing to seclusion. They engaged in wage employment. Some were market women, wet nurses, or midwives. This contrast clearly illustrates the way in which class defined the lives of women in ancient Greece. But here's the kicker. Women were considered too emotional to participate in politics or public life, yet they ran the household finances. Who's emotional now when the budget doesn't add up? The one-in-one-out rule governed acquisitions in homes where space was limited and waste was shameful, ensuring possessions never exceeded what storage could hold. When a new dress came home, an old one went to the church donation bin. When children received toys, outgrown playthings were passed to younger cousins. This wasn't minimalism as a lifestyle trend, but practical survival in homes without walk-in closets. Families understood that every item required space and maintenance. That accumulation led to clutter, which led to chaos. The rule forced thoughtful purchasing because bringing something new meant parting with something familiar. Mothers evaluated potential acquisitions carefully, asking whether the item was worth displacing something already owned. This discipline extended to kitchens and linen closets. The system created natural limits, preventing the suffocating accumulation modern homes struggle against. It taught children that ownership carried responsibility and that having less meant caring for things better. However, herbalism was not only about easing the symptoms of the flu and other diseases as well. As you know, some of the most popular materials at the time, such as opium and tobacco, were indispensable to early capitalism. Women, being important economic contributors in their households, participated in the purchase and selling of these products, or were involved in the distribution of products by other individuals. Usually, when it comes to the early drug trade, we tend to concentrate on the heads of the chain. However, the female population played a significant role in the production and consumption of substances such as opium or tobacco. While opium was more linked to the Orient, tobacco was gradually gaining acceptance in Europe, and women were involved in planting or selling the substance. A place for everything and everything in its place was more than a saying. It was the organizing principle governing every drawer, shelf, and closet in well-run households. Keys hung on hooks by the door. Scissors lived in the sewing basket, and tools stayed in the toolbox rather than scattered across workbenches. This systematic approach meant nothing was ever truly lost, only temporarily misplaced by someone who hadn't returned it properly. Children learned that borrowed items returned to their spots, that using something meant putting it back. The habit eliminated frantic morning searches for shoes, evening hunts for glasses, and the irritation of misplaced necessities. Every family member knew where things belonged because locations never changed, creating household muscle memory. This predictability brought peace. Visitors noticed how easily hosts located anything needed. The principle required initial thought but paid dividends in time saved. Cluttered surfaces simply didn't exist because everything had a designated spot. So let me tell you, the housewives in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, or Rome had their lives determined by their cultures, their economies, and, can you imagine, their husband's social standing? In ancient Mesopotamia, a household was an organization or an industry in its own right. There were not only wives and mothers, but also good weavers, bakers, and even traders. A woman of this period was responsible for the procurement of food, supervision of help if one was affluent, and even manufacturing of products to sell in the market. Consider them as the first superwomen because earning the bread meant actually making it. In law, women's rights were connected to their marital status. A married woman was regarded as her husband's property, but she had a lot of power in the household. These women were managing everyday operations with the efficiency of a CEO. Just think about how you would organize an entire household without Google Calendar. And speaking of multitasking, have you ever tried weaving while having toddlers run around and play? I have not done it either, but these women did it every day. Hats off to them. The entryway system created a buffer zone between the outside world's dirt and the home's cleanliness, a transition space where outdoor contamination was stopped before spreading. Mats caught mud, boot trays contained wet footwear, hooks held coats and hats, and small tables received keys and mail. This wasn't elaborate mudroom construction, but simple organization acknowledging the mess people tracked indoors. The entry routine was ingrained. Shoes came off, coats were hung, hands were washed before moving deeper into the house. Children learned this sequence before they learned to read, the pattern becoming automatic through daily repetition. Grandmothers kept brooms near entryways to address debris immediately. The system worked because it was consistent, because everyone followed it, because exceptions weren't tolerated. The entryway contained the chaos of coming and going, preventing scattered shoes and abandoned coats cluttering modern homes. This first line of defense made subsequent cleaning easier, stopping dirt at the door. While the male folk were out hunting or engaging in other rampages, women were not only in charge of the home, but also the defense of the home. Viking women were fierce. If the homestead was in any danger, then they were fully capable of protecting it. There are no damsels in distress in this one either. This wasn't just about the physical power of the man. The Viking women were very strategic in their thinking. They understood how to safeguard their homes, where to conceal the property, and how to brace for the storm. Marriage in Norse society can be described as a practical affair. It was not about love, but about land, relationships, and consolidating family ties. Viking women were allowed to contribute dowry to marriage as well, and they had some rights that were quite liberal during those years. Wiping down surfaces after every use was reflexive action in kitchens and bathrooms where small messes became big problems if ignored. Counter space was cleared and wiped after meal preparation, not left for later cleanup that might never come. Bathroom sinks got quick swipes after morning routines, preventing toothpaste buildup and water spots requiring scrubbing later. This wasn't obsessive cleaning, but efficient prevention, keeping surfaces manageable with minimal effort. Grandmothers kept rags within arm's reach for these quick wipes, understanding that 30 seconds now saved 30 minutes later. The habit meant kitchens were always ready for the next task, that bathrooms stayed presentable for unexpected guests. Children learned that using a space meant leaving it ready for the next person. The constant wiping prevented grimy buildup that made deep cleaning necessary, keeping homes in perpetual state of light cleanliness rather than cycling between spotless and squalid. In the event that the male counterparts were out waging war, or let's not pretend, out drinking and carousing in distant places, the women were left behind to run the home front. And when I say manage, I mean they were the ones in charge of it all. Women in the Viking period were also in charge of the farm, the animals, the fields, and the food preservation during the very long and severe winters. You can best imagine them as the presidents of their homes. They didn't just assign work, they accomplished it. They milked cows, churned butter, and weaved cloth, sometimes all at once, while watching over children and possibly wolves. If multitasking was an Olympic sport, then Viking housewives would have won gold medals. And let's not forget about the trading. The women of Viking weren't restricted to their homes, but also engaged in business. They bartered products such as textiles, dairy products, and even precious jewelry for the economic growth of the Vikings. Some were the kings of trade that could have been the Bezos of the Viking Age, but with way better ships. Sweeping before bed was evening ritual in farmhouses, city apartments, and suburban homes alike, ensuring floors were clean when morning light revealed every speck of dirt. The day's accumulation of crumbs, tracked dirt, and dust bunnies was swept into piles and collected before anyone retired for the night. This wasn't deep cleaning, but daily maintenance that prevented buildup and kept homes feeling fresh. Brooms hung on hooks by back doors, ready for their nightly duty, bristles worn from constant use. Grandmothers swept kitchen floors after supper dishes were done, then moved through dining rooms with practiced efficiency. The swooshing sound of bristles against wood or linoleum became the soundtrack of evening routines. Morning meant waking to clean floors that felt pleasant under bare feet, not gritty surfaces announcing yesterday's neglect. The habit took 10 minutes but transformed the feeling of an entire home. Sweeping also served as informal inspection, revealing spills needing mopping and items rolled under furniture. The Roman housewives or matrons had similar functions as Greek housewives, but had somewhat more rights in legal matters. They could hold property, write a will, and even inherit an estate. Thus, they were stuck between the four walls of their home, but they did have some leeway when it came to exercising power. Marriage was more of a business in Rome than anything else. People did not marry for love. Both husbands and wives had roles in managing the home and children, and if the couple was wealthy, the running of large properties as well. Roman women were also actively involved in the social network, as they provided dinner parties, which would be compared to modern receptions, where people were offered a few snacks. And while they could not vote or be elected, Roman women could pull the strings from behind the scenes. Thus, while their husbands were out conquering the world, these women were conquering the palace. But what happens when men go off raiding and pillaging? Spoiler alert, it did not matter whether you were a Viking housewife, you were also a fighter. Listen up, because we're setting sail for the Viking Age to find out how women kept the hearth warm and handled a sword as well. Rotating stock in the pantry was systematic practice ensuring nothing expired forgotten on back shelves while newer purchases got used first. When groceries came home, older cans and packages moved forward while fresh supplies went behind, creating natural first-in, first-out flow. This wasn't complicated inventory management, but simple habit that kept food from spoiling and money from being thrown away. Grandmothers could survey pantries and know exactly what needed using soon, planning meals around items approaching their prime. The rotation also revealed patterns: what got used quickly, what lingered too long, what shouldn't be purchased again. Children learned the system by helping unpack groceries, understanding that organization had purpose beyond neatness. The habit extended to refrigerators where leftovers moved forward and new items went back. Rotating stock meant fewer emergency runs because supplies stayed visible. The practice treated food with respect, acknowledging that every purchase represented earned labor. Viking women, unlike many other societies at the time, could also divorce their husbands if things did not go well. If he was not kind to her, was not bringing home the bacon, or God forbid exhibited cowardice, She could just pick up her belongings and go. She might even take the furniture. That's what you call a solid prenuptial agreement, huh? Women of the Vikings were not only housewives but also active participants in the overall Viking economy. They sewed sails for ships, which were used for piracy and commerce. Women's textile work is the foundation for the Viking longships. They also worked on the farm's resources and made sure that the family was well provided with food and other essential goods to sustain and improve their lives. Being a Viking housewife wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. But let's be real, you'd probably need a nap after milking cows, weaving a sail, and shooing off a band of marauders. Nap culture clearly wasn't a thing back then. Making the bed immediately upon rising was considered non-negotiable in households across America, a habit so ingrained that children learned it before they could tie their shoes. The moment feet touched the floor, hands went to work smoothing sheets, tucking corners, and fluffing pillows until the bed looked crisp and inviting. This wasn't about impressing visitors who might never see the bedroom. It was about starting the day with a completed task that set the tone for everything that followed. Grandmothers taught that an unmade bed made the entire room feel chaotic, no matter how clean everything else might be. Hospital corners were standard, sheets pulled tight enough to bounce a coin. For families living in small homes where bedrooms doubled as sitting areas, a made bed was essential for dignity. This simple discipline rippled outward, encouraging tidiness elsewhere because one clean space naturally demanded another. The made bed became proof that you respected your home and yourself. Now, let us go to the world of ancient Egypt, where women had a relatively higher status in society than in any other ancient society. Egyptian housewives could manage households and estates and could engage in religious or even political activities. Thus, while the men were occupied with constructing pyramids, or at least with demanding that pyramids be constructed, women were ensuring the proper functioning of the home. Cleopatra is a perfect example of how women could rise to power. Well, yes, not all women became queens, but the case of Cleopatra proves that Egyptian society did not exclude women's capabilities at all. Of course, not every housewife had a pet snake or a love affair with a Roman general, as the world of soap operas tried to convince people. Many were concerned with matters of child-rearing, cooking, managing households, and doing all these with incredibly great efficiency. The daily dish ritual meant no family went to bed with dirty dishes sitting in the sink, a rule enforced with quiet determination in kitchens from coast to coast. Supper dishes were washed, dried, and put away before anyone sat down to listen to the radio or read the evening paper. Hot, soapy water filled the basin while someone scraped plates, another washed, and children stood ready with dish towels for drying duty. The assembly line moved efficiently, turning a chore into family time, where the day's events were discussed. Letting dishes pile up was considered shameful, a sign of laziness that invited pests and created overwhelming work later. The clean kitchen at night meant waking to order rather than chaos, a fresh start that made mornings smoother. Grandmothers knew that small messes invited larger ones, that one dirty pan led to a sink full of crusted dishes impossible to clean. The nightly dish ritual was discipline disguised as habit, teaching children that immediate action prevented future problems. This contrast between the gentle and nurturing female figure and a businesswoman or a trader gives us the best glimpse into how layered women's lives were. It was as if being a housewife was a full-time job. One moment you are quilting and the next you are haggling over the sale of herbs or bartering tobacco for anything else. As we have also noted, the early modern era shifted women's roles, and women embraced commerce, medicine, and even the drug business. But what happens when war comes knocking? What changes did housewives undergo during the First World War? What becomes of the home when war starts? Although the First World War was a man's war, housewives also took up jobs that they never dreamt of before. During the war, men went to war, and women were left to go to work in factories, fields, and even hospitals. The war not only changed the nature of the workforce, but it also altered the role that women were expected to play, and therefore, the role of a housewife. The mending basket sat in every parlor and living room, a constant reminder that clothing deserved repair rather than replacement. Buttons popped off, seams split, hems dropped, and socks developed holes, but nothing was discarded until truly beyond saving. Grandmothers kept needles threaded and ready, tackling small repairs during quiet evening hours. Children learned that a missing button wasn't excuse for a new shirt, but opportunity to practice stitching. The basket itself became household institution, filled with thread spools, patches, spare buttons saved from worn-out garments, and darning eggs for socks. Mending wasn't drudgery, but responsible stewardship of family resources. A well-mended garment showed pride rather than poverty, evidence that someone cared enough to maintain what they owned. The habit kept wardrobes functional longer and taught patience and skill. When mending baskets disappeared from living rooms, so did the assumption that things could be fixed. It must also be noted that women were involved in the manufacture and vending of opium. Where opium poppies were cultivated, women harvested the plants, scraped the opium, and sometimes sold it. This early participation in the trade is but one piece of a larger narrative of how the work that women did off-stage was essential to economic development, sometimes work that was both public and hidden. Thus, while the cult of the angel in the house was ruling the waves in terms of culture, real-life housewives were far from just sweeping and cooking. They were businessmen, doctors, and at times clandestine merchants in the expanding international market. They were not only silent spectators in the home, they were working for their family's well-being and prosperity, even though society wanted them to remain invisible. They say behind every great man is a woman. But in the early modern era, it was more like, behind every great merchant is his wife, who's probably brewing the ale he's about to sell. Immediate stain treatment was kitchen wisdom passed between generations, the understanding that fresh spills cleaned easily, while dried ones became permanent reminders of neglect. The moment something splattered or dripped, someone reached for salt, club soda, vinegar, or whatever remedy the stain required. Red wine got salt immediately, grease got cornstarch, blood got cold water. This wasn't obsessive behavior, but practical knowledge saving clothing, linens, and upholstery from permanent damage. Grandmothers kept cleaning supplies within reach because 5 minutes of delay could mean hours of scrubbing later, or ruined fabric that couldn't be replaced on tight budgets. Children learned to report spills immediately rather than hide them, understanding that quick confession meant resolution while concealment meant disaster. The habit extended to countertops and walls where residue could leave marks. Treating stains immediately required willingness to interrupt other activities, but the investment paid dividends. But the factory floor was not all rainbows and butterflies, if you know what I mean. Picture the change from your kitchen apron to overalls and your working environment filled with the sound of metallic noise. It was not very stylish, but it had to be done. In Britain, women such as the munitionettes, who worked round the clock producing ammunition for the front lines, were considered heroes of the war. Even at home, there were obstacles that the girls had to overcome. Women at home experienced scarcity of some necessities such as sugar, meat, and flour because of rationing. Living on scarce resources meant that every day was a challenge on how to manage the household. One would expect preparing a meal for 5 people to be challenging. Well, let me tell you what it is like to prepare a meal using 1 egg, a slice of bread, and a prayer. Weekly deep cleaning days brought entire households together for intensive work that kept homes genuinely clean rather than superficially tidy. Saturday mornings meant furniture was moved, rugs were beaten, windows were washed, and every surface received attention it didn't get during weekdays. This wasn't optional housework squeezed between other activities, but scheduled labor taking priority over recreation. Mothers assigned tasks based on age and ability, with even small children contributing by dusting baseboards or polishing doorknobs. The deep clean reached places daily tidying missed, under beds, behind sofas, inside cabinets. Mattresses were flipped, curtains were shaken, and light fixtures were wiped free of dust. The weekly rhythm prevented overwhelming mess, keeping homes in constant state of manageable cleanliness. By noon, houses gleamed and smelled of lemon oil. The tradition taught children that maintenance was easier than restoration. Saturday deep cleans became family ritual, transforming houses into homes. To maintain high morale, housewives had to be creative in the kitchen. Products such as war bread, made from substitute flour, and mock apple pie, which was made from crackers instead of apples, became familiar foods of the war. Women offered recipes and recipes, building a support system during the worst periods. Not only that, but housewives also became responsible for the emotional maintenance of their families and kept them together. As the men went off to fight in other countries and become husbands, brothers, and sons, women were the ones who kept everything together. Letters were written, care packages prepared, and children reassured, all while dealing with their own fears and anxieties about the war. Not all women served only in factories and homes during the war, as some took active participation in the war. Most housewives came forward to become nurses and became members of the Red Cross to attend to the injured soldiers. These roles were strenuous and demanded much of the emotions of the women, but they provided them with a role and a direct way to participate in the war. Putting away clean laundry immediately was discipline preventing the chair pile, that infamous mountain of clean clothes sitting for days becoming wrinkled and forgotten. The moment laundry came off the line or out of the wringer, it was folded, pressed if necessary, and placed in drawers or closets. There was no intermediate step, no waiting until later, no temporary storage on furniture. This efficiency meant closets stayed organized, clothes remained wrinkle-free, and bedrooms never accumulated shameful textile mountains. Grandmothers understood that clean laundry left out collected dust, absorbed cooking odors, and eventually needed washing again despite never being worn. The prompt put away also revealed items needing mending and children who had outgrown clothing. It kept household inventory visible. Children learned that completing tasks meant finishing them entirely, that laundry wasn't done until it was away. The discipline maintained order through consistent action rather than periodic heroic cleanup efforts. Housewives prior to the First World War were confined to household duties such as cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the family. However, things were different when the war started in 1914. When millions of men went to the front, women were left to do what had previously been considered man's work. All of a sudden, housewives were to be found operating munition factories, driving ambulances, and tilling the land. These women were helpful to the war effort as they provided weapons and other important commodities for the front line. During the war, 1.25 million British women entered employment for the first time. This altered the perception of women in the workplace forever. Seasonal clothing rotation was twice-yearly ritual, keeping closets manageable and wardrobes organized for whatever weather demanded. When spring arrived, winter coats and sweaters were cleaned, inspected for damage, and stored in trunks or cedar chests. Summer clothes emerged from storage, were assessed for fit and condition, and took their place in newly spacious closets. The process reversed each autumn. This wasn't mere shuffling, but thoughtful inventory revealing what needed replacing, what could be handed down, and what had served its purpose. Grandmothers used rotation to assess children's growth, noting which items wouldn't fit next season. The habit kept closets from overflowing with out-of-season items complicating daily dressing. Cedar and lavender sachets protected stored clothing from moths. Seasonal rotation imposed order on wardrobes, making morning routines simpler and closet space more functional throughout the year. Think about it, and try to switch from having to apply a bandage on minor injuries, such as scraped knees at home, to treat soldiers injured in a war in a field hospital. The transition was anything but easy, but it brought out the strength of women during this period. The efforts of housewives were not ignored during World War I. It was after the war in 1918 that people started to change their perception of women's capacity. They fought for their rights on the home front and in the workforce and paved the way for future reforms such as women's suffrage around the world. However, the return to the new normal was not without hitches. Women were supposed to go back to the pre-war housewife status upon the return of men from work, which made some of them feel unfulfilled. However, the effects which they produced during the war could not be wiped off, and they acted as a springboard to future social reforms. The Sunday reset prepared homes for the week ahead, a deliberate afternoon spent ensuring everything was ready for Monday's demands. Clothes were laid out, shoes were polished, bags were packed, and lunches were planned so morning chaos couldn't derail the week. This wasn't anxious preparation, but calm ritual, bringing order to the transition between weekend relaxation and weekday responsibility. Grandmothers ironed shirts, checked homework folders, confirmed schedules, and addressed anything that might cause problems Monday morning. The reset extended to kitchens where meal plans were confirmed and ingredients verified. Children participated by organizing their spaces and preparing school needs. The habit created psychological closure on weekends while building confidence for weeks ahead. Families practicing the Sunday reset rarely experienced frantic scrambling plaguing unprepared households. The routine acknowledged that preparation was itself a form of rest, that organized beginnings made entire weeks smoother. 30 habits, and the hands that practiced them are almost all still. If any of this felt like home, share it with someone who remembers.